Most people grow up believing that more protein always means more strength. A good steak on the plate, a little bacon on the weekend, whole milk in the morning, even liver that many were told was nourishing. These foods feel familiar, comforting, and trusted. What often goes unnoticed is how quietly the body responds over time. The kidneys work steadily, day and night, without asking for attention. They don't send sharp signals or sudden pain when the load becomes heavy. For many people, everything feels normal on the surface. It's only later, sometimes during a routine checkup, that numbers like creatinine begin to rise. That moment can feel surprising because nothing felt wrong before. This is how strain often shows up, slowly and without warning. This conversation is not about fear, and it's not about removing everything you enjoy. It's about understanding how different proteins behave in the body after 60 and how small choices can make a meaningful difference. Some proteins are easier for the kidneys to handle, while others quietly demand more work than we realize. If you stay with me, you'll learn which proteins are better limited, which ones tend to feel gentler after 60, and how to approach everyday meals with more confidence. This is practical knowledge meant to help you feel informed and steady, not restricted or alarmed. As we get older, the idea that more protein automatically means more strength starts to deserve a second look. Protein is important at every age, but the body doesn't handle it the same way at 65 as it did at 35. What once felt energizing can begin to feel heavier, even if nothing obvious seems wrong. The kidneys play a quiet role in this process. They act like steady filters, working continuously in the background to keep the internal environment balanced. They don't ask for rest, and they rarely draw attention to themselves. Because of that, changes tend to happen gradually, almost invisibly. When protein intake is higher than the body can comfortably handle, the kidneys simply keep doing their job. They adjust, compensate, and carry the extra load without complaint. Day after day, that extra work adds up in small increments, not in dramatic moments. This is why many people feel fine for years, unaware that subtle strain is accumulating. It's important to be clear here. Protein itself is not the problem. The body relies on it for structure, repair, and daily function. What matters is the kind of protein being eaten, how often it appears, and how it's prepared. Certain proteins feel easier for the body to manage later in life. Others tend to feel heavier when portions are large, meals are frequent, or cooking methods are aggressive. When the balance is off, the kidneys simply adapt as long as they can. Understanding this difference changes the conversation. It shifts the focus away from cutting protein out and toward choosing it more thoughtfully. That awareness creates space for better decisions without pressure or extremes. For many people, organ meats carry a sense of tradition. Liver, heart, and kidney are often remembered as nourishing foods from earlier generations. They were associated with strength, vitality, and doing something good for the body. What's easy to miss is how differently these foods are handled later in life. Organ meats are very dense, not just in protein, but in compounds the body needs to clear after digestion. When we were younger, that process usually felt effortless. After 60, the same foods can begin to feel heavier on the system, even when portions haven't changed. The kidneys are the ones quietly managing that load. They filter continuously, adapting as best they can. Over time, frequent exposure to very concentrated proteins asks them to work longer and harder than they might prefer. This doesn't happen all at once. It builds gradually, meal by meal, without any clear signal that something needs attention. This is why age matters. As we grow older, the body's ability to process and clear dense foods becomes less flexible, what once felt strengthening can slowly become demanding, especially when eaten often. For those who still enjoy organ meats, the goal isn't elimination, it's about making them easier for the body to handle. A simple step, like soaking these meats in cold water before cooking, can make them feel lighter and less intense. It's a small adjustment meant to reduce the overall load rather than change the food itself. These kinds of choices don't fix or reverse anything. They simply offer the kidneys a bit more breathing room in daily life. Red meat has a special place at the table for many families. Beef, lamb, and pork are often tied to gatherings, celebrations, and familiar routines that feel grounding and satisfying. The goal here isn't to label these foods as bad or forbidden. It's to look at how often they appear and how they're prepared, especially later in life. As the body ages, heavier foods tend to linger longer during digestion. Red meat, in particular, asks for more work after a meal, not just because of its protein content, but because of its richness and density. When this kind of meal shows up frequently, day after day, the body quietly adapts by working harder behind the scenes. The kidneys are part of that adjustment. They respond steadily, managing the byproducts that come from breaking down richer meals. This added demand doesn't create discomfort right away. Instead, it accumulates gradually, shaped by both portion size and frequency. How red meat is cooked also matters more than many people realize. High heat and charred surfaces make a meal heavier for the body to handle. Those deeply browned edges may taste appealing, but they tend to feel more demanding during digestion. Over time, that extra effort becomes part of the kidney's daily workload. There are ways to make red meat feel gentler without giving it up entirely. Letting the meat rest briefly in a simple marinade before cooking can soften its intensity. Using moderate heat rather than very high temperatures keeps the meal easier to process. Avoiding burnt or blackened edges helps the body move through digestion more smoothly. These are not dramatic changes. They're small adjustments that shift how a familiar food is experienced by the body. For many people, processed meats are woven into everyday life. Bacon sizzling in the morning, a sausage on the side, ham in a sandwich, a hot dog at a family gathering. These foods feel convenient, familiar, and comforting, especially as part of long-held routines. What often stays out of sight is how much extra work they quietly create inside the body. Processed meats are designed to last longer and taste stronger, which means they carry more salt and added compounds than fresh foods. As we get older, the body tends to respond to these additions more slowly and with less flexibility. The kidneys are part of that response. They handle balance, filtering what isn't needed and keeping the internal environment steady. When meals are regularly high in salt or preserved proteins, that balance requires more constant adjustment. Nothing dramatic happens after one breakfast or one lunch. It's the repetition that matters. In American culture, breakfast is often where this pattern begins. A quick plate with bacon or sausage feels simple and satisfying. Over time, though, starting the day with heavily processed protein can make the system work harder before the day has even begun. There are small ways to make these foods feel less demanding. Letting slices of bacon or ham sit briefly in cold water before cooking can soften their intensity. Cooking them gently, rather than over very high heat, keeps the meal lighter during digestion. Spacing these foods out, instead of having them daily, also changes how the body experiences them. These adjustments don't change traditions overnight. They simply make familiar habits easier for the body to manage. For many Americans, milk has long been associated with strength and good nutrition. A glass of whole milk in the morning often feels like a simple, wholesome habit that has followed people from childhood into later years. It's familiar, reassuring, and rarely questioned. What tends to change quietly with age is how the body handles dairy. Whole milk contains casein, a dense protein that takes longer to break down. Earlier in life, this process usually feels smooth and effortless. Later on, digestion often slows, and heavier foods can linger longer than before. When digestion takes more time, the body needs to manage what's left behind more carefully. The kidneys remain steady in the background, continuing their filtering work without drawing attention. Nothing feels sharp or uncomfortable in the moment, which is why this shift often goes unnoticed. Rather than removing milk completely, small adjustments can make it feel gentler. Warming milk slightly before drinking can make it easier for the body to handle. Adding a pinch of cinnamon brings a mild, familiar flavor that many people find comforting. It also encourages a slower, more mindful pace. The most important part is noticing how your body responds. Some people feel lighter with these changes. Others prefer smaller portions or less frequent use. That awareness becomes part of eating with intention. At this point, it's important to clear up one of the biggest misunderstandings around food and aging. Protein itself is not the enemy. In fact, the body needs protein every single day at every stage of life. Protein supports structure, helps maintain strength, and plays a role in daily renewal. Without enough of it, the body doesn't feel steady or resilient. So the question is not whether protein belongs in the diet. The question is how it shows up. What truly matters is the kind of protein being chosen, how much appears on the plate, and how it's prepared. These three details shape how the body experiences a meal, especially after 60. A small portion can feel very different from a large one. A gently cooked dish moves through the body differently than something heavily fried or charred. This is where many people get confused. They hear mixed messages and assume the safest option is to avoid protein altogether. That approach often leads to less energy and poorer appetite, which creates its own challenges. Balance, not avoidance, is what the body responds to best. When protein is chosen with care, it can feel supportive rather than demanding. Certain sources tend to feel lighter and easier to manage. They provide nourishment without asking the kidneys to carry unnecessary weight. This is the shift worth paying attention to. Not less protein, but better protein prepared in ways that respect how the body changes with time. When protein feels lighter in the body, the kidneys often have more space to stay calm. This is where certain foods stand out, not because they are powerful or extreme, but because they work quietly and consistently with the body. Unsweetened yogurt is a good example. It's familiar, easy to find, and simple to use. Beyond its protein, yogurt brings beneficial bacteria that support the gut. When digestion feels smoother, the entire system tends to move with less resistance. Many older adults notice that when their digestion feels settled, their energy during the day feels steadier as well. A small bowl a few times a week is often enough to become part of a comfortable routine. Chia seeds work well alongside this habit. They're small, neutral in flavor, and easy to add without changing a meal very much. Once soaked, they take on a soft texture that blends naturally into yogurt, oatmeal, or even a glass of water. They're often chosen for their omega-3 fats, which many people appreciate as part of a balanced, mindful diet. Used regularly, they become less of a food choice and more of a quiet habit. Then there's mackerel. It's a fish that doesn't demand much attention, yet fits easily into weekly meals. Baked gently, it feels lighter than heavier cuts of meat and pairs naturally with vegetables or grains. Many people enjoy it simply because it leaves them feeling satisfied without that heavy sensation later on. What these foods have in common is not intensity, but consistency. They're easy to repeat, easy to prepare, and don't require strict rules. When habits like these show up regularly, the body often responds in a calmer, more balanced way. As the years pass, the body changes in quiet, predictable ways. The kidneys are no exception. They continue to work faithfully, but the margin for stress becomes narrower than it once was. There is simply less reserve to draw from, and recovery tends to move at a slower pace. Earlier in life, the system could bounce back quickly after heavy meals or long stretches of routine strain. After 60, that flexibility is not quite the same. The kidneys still adapt, but they do so more gradually, asking for steadiness rather than excess. This is why foods that once felt harmless can begin to feel different over time. Nothing about the food itself has changed. What's changed is how much effort the body now needs to manage it. Old habits can quietly become new sources of load, not because they are wrong, but because the body's rhythm has shifted. Seeing this clearly changes the mindset around food. It moves the conversation away from restriction and toward care. Self-care in this context isn't about taking things away. It's about choosing what feels easier to live with day after day. When meals are selected with this awareness, they become part of a supportive routine rather than a test of endurance. That approach allows the kidneys to keep doing their work steadily without being pushed to their limits. When protein is chosen carefully, it can feel clean, steady, and supportive rather than heavy. After 60, many people notice that certain foods simply move through the body more easily. These are proteins that tend to leave less behind, asking for less effort during digestion and daily balance. Egg whites are one of the simplest examples. They're light, familiar, and easy to prepare. Because they're mostly pure protein without added richness, many older adults find they sit comfortably after a meal. Gently cooked egg whites, whether lightly steamed or softly set, often feel easier to handle than richer preparations. Tofu offers a similar sense of ease. It's soft, neutral, and adaptable, blending naturally into soups, stir-fries, or baked dishes. Prepared gently, without heavy sauces or frying, tofu tends to feel calm in the body. It provides nourishment without creating the dense feeling that some heavier proteins do. Tilapia fits well into this pattern too. It's a mild fish that doesn't overpower a meal. Baked or lightly cooked, it pairs easily with vegetables and grains. Many people enjoy it simply because it feels satisfying without lingering heaviness afterward. Quinoa rounds out this group in a different way. It's a plant-based option that works well as a foundation for meals. Cooked softly and combined with simple ingredients, it often feels steady and grounding. It's the kind of food that supports routine rather than disrupting it. What these proteins share is not intensity, but balance. They're easier to digest, simpler to prepare, and fit naturally into everyday meals when cooking stays gentle and uncomplicated. There are certain foods that many people choose with good intentions. They're often labeled as lighter, leaner, or more practical, especially in busy daily life. What's less discussed is how some of these choices can quietly ask more from the body when they appear too often. Turkey bacon is a good example. It's commonly seen as a healthier swap, yet it's still processed and designed for long shelf life. When eaten regularly, it can feel just as demanding as the foods it replaces, especially as the body becomes less flexible with age. Red lentils are another food that often surprises people. They're plant-based and widely considered wholesome. For many individuals, they work just fine, But when portions are large or meals repeat frequently, they can feel heavier than expected, particularly later in life. Hot dogs carry a similar pattern. They're familiar, convenient, and deeply rooted in American culture. Eaten occasionally, they're simply part of a moment. When they become routine, though, the body may take longer to settle after meals. Whey protein isolate often enters the picture through supplements. It's popular for its efficiency and ease. For older adults, concentrated forms of protein can sometimes feel intense when used daily, especially compared to whole foods that digest more gradually. Canned beans can also be misleading. They're plant-based and affordable, but the preparation matters. When eaten straight from the can without rinsing or balance, they may feel heavier than expected over time. Beef steak rounds out this group. It's often viewed as a reward or centerpiece of a meal. Enjoyed occasionally, it fits comfortably into many lifestyles. When it appears frequently, especially in large portions, it can begin to feel demanding rather than satisfying. The key point isn't avoidance or strict rules. It's awareness. Knowing how often these foods show up and how the body responds allows for more thoughtful choices. Beyond food choices, everyday habits quietly shape how the body feels over time. Often, it's not big changes that matter most, but small ones repeated gently and consistently. Hydration works best when it's steady. Sipping water throughout the day tends to feel easier than drinking large amounts all at once. Many older adults find a simple rhythm helps the body stay comfortable without feeling rushed or overwhelmed. Eating pace plays a role as well. Taking a little more time with meals allows digestion to unfold calmly. When chewing is unhurried, the body often feels more settled afterward, and meals feel more satisfying without needing extra portions. Salt awareness becomes more important with age. It doesn't require removing flavor, just noticing where it comes from. Simple seasonings, herbs, and natural ingredients often feel lighter than heavily salted foods, especially when meals repeat day after day. Starting the morning with fiber and omega-3, rich foods can set a gentle tone. Whole grains, fruits, seeds, or simple additions to breakfast often feel grounding and easy to repeat. They don't ask for perfection, just regular presence. Movement completes the picture. A short, relaxed walk, even at an easy pace, can feel refreshing rather than demanding. Consistency matters more than distance or speed, especially later in life. These habits aren't meant to be intense or exact. They fit into real routines and real mornings, supporting the body through steady repetition. Over time, it becomes clear that every meal is a choice. Not a test and not a judgment, just a moment where the body is either supported gently or asked to do a little more work. Those moments add up quietly and steadily. Perfection isn't required for the body to respond. Meals don't need to look a certain way, and habits don't need to follow strict rules. What matters more is understanding what feels easier to live with, then returning to those choices often enough for them to become familiar. When eating becomes calmer and more consistent, the body tends to settle into a rhythm of its own. There's less push and pull, less effort spent compensating. Small adjustments, repeated without pressure, begin to shape how days feel. This approach is less about discipline and more about care. Choosing foods that feel lighter, cooking in ways that feel gentler, and allowing time for digestion all send the same message. The body notices when it's being treated with patience. Responses don't arrive all at once. They appear gradually, in steadier energy, easier mornings, and meals that feel more comfortable than demanding. That's how quiet care tends to work. As we come to the end of this conversation, one idea stands out clearly. Knowledge brings steadiness. while fear only creates tension. When you understand how your body responds, choices feel calmer and more confident. If something you heard today felt helpful or clarifying, you're welcome to support this video with a like. Sharing it with someone you care about can be a quiet way to pass along useful information. And if you'd like to stay connected, subscribing allows you to return whenever this kind of guidance feels supportive. This channel is here for people who want to care for their kidneys, liver, and heart after 60 in a thoughtful way. Not through extremes or pressure, but through steady understanding and everyday awareness. The focus is always on small habits that fit real lives. The body has a remarkable ability to adjust when it's given the right kind of support. When choices are made with care and repeated gently, the system often finds its own balance again.